main thing that we have going on here. However, because we raise Icelandic sheep and we are here in Gimli, we have, huge Icelandic roots in town. It's a big part of the culture and, pride of Gimli. We have the Icelandic festival that happens every single year, August long weekend. Yeah. And so we decided that we also wanted to kind of piggyback a little bit on that with some agro-tourism. So we renovated the front of the barn here into this little shop where we sell local goods, things that people make, like the honey, the woodworking my friend makes, all the clothing and yarn and all of that sort of stuff is all stuff made here in Manitoba, made here on the farm. And so we open up the farm during the August long weekend. People come out here, they get to pet some sheep, they get to hang out and, just do something a little bit more than just move hay bales all day long, get to interact with people, because I'm a bit of a ham for those sorts of things. Like, I like to have people and talk to them and all that kind of stuff. So it's been part of the project for our farm is to incorporate all of these kind of newer methods that we can in farming, as well as doing a bit of that agro-tourism, because it's tough to make a go of things nowadays. You kind of have to have a few projects in the works at all times. Yes. So that's one of them. But look at this. Like I said, we raise Icelandic sheep, so they do have a pretty unique fleece. But yeah, take a peek around. I'm going to greet the rest of the folks that are showing up. Met a woman who came to the Icelandic festival here. She's from Iceland. Her name's Sigrun. That's her on the little thing. And she's a knitter. She makes patterns and sweaters and all kinds of cool stuff like this. And she had created a pattern that she called I don't know if they have any up here, but they're called the Lonely Luckystone mitts. She was staying with a friend of hers at Lonely Beach, which is just at the edge of our property here. And she created this pattern using lucky stones, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. They're these little, we probably have some lying around, but they're little stones you can find on the beach here that have a hole in them. And we always call them lucky stones. Ever since I was a kid, you'd find lucky stones all over the place. And so she created this pattern called the Lonely Luckystone. Our farm is called Luckystone Acres. We met her and we said, hey, we raise sheep. We make yarn. Why don't we collaborate? And so she brought us a bunch of her patterns, and she actually designed for us an Icelandic sweater pattern, just specifically for our farm.
Wow, that's cool.
And so it's got, and you have to use your imagination a little bit. It's hard to be photorealistic, but this is supposed to be our little barn. These little heads are supposed to be sheep heads with their horns. And then these are some lucky stones, rocks with a little hole in them along the yoke. And she designed this pattern for our farm, and now we have our own sweater that is unique to here. You can't find it anywhere else. So it's kind of neat. This one is mine, and it's made from our yarn here that we produce on that we make out of our wool from our sheep. So I don't know, it's kind of special that it was designed, it was the material was grown and all processed here in Manitoba. We have clothes that are 100% made in Manitoba, and I think that's super special. So many things come from so many places to make something. Like, I mean, I'm wearing every article of clothing I have on, who knows, zippers from Bangladesh, and it was made in, Cambodia, and the material comes from cotton fields in Georgia, and who knows, it's all coming from all across the world, which is great that we can do that, but it's cool to see something made all in Manitoba. We can do that kind of thing. We're very creative and industrious people here. We put a little bit of elbow grease into it, and I mean,
how could you tell the difference between your wool and another wool?
Well, there's a lot of differences in wools, actually. There are hundreds of different breeds of sheep. Icelandic wool is unique in that it has a little bit more of a coarseness to it than others because it's got a double coat. It's got this kind of thicker outer fleece on it. It's almost like a hair. And then it has the thinner kind of woolier fleece at the bottom. And so when they use that to make yarn, it's called a lopi yarn, and it's a single ply yarn where they'll spin all of those fibers together to make a single ply yarn, which, and we have some right over here. And if you look at this, you'll see that it's not multiple strands the way that you see with a lot of commercial yarn, where it'll almost look braided, the strands, or twisted a few around each other. This is a single strand, and it's kind of indicative of the Icelandic sweaters. They almost all use that lopi yarn, and so it's as well as breeding stock. and we have been raising animals here since 2020. We purchased this farm in 2018. It was a dairy farm for a very, very long time. It actually was my grandfather's farm. He passed away in 2018, and when he did, his estate was liquidated, and at one point, Zoe and I were kind of just looking around and thinking, well, this farm is going to be sold. It's going to, who knows what will happen to it. And we thought, hey, why don't we buy the farm and see what we can do with it? So we did. We spent a little bit of time the first year thinking about what it was we wanted to do. Initially, Zoe wanted to raise broom corn and sell brooms. That was our first thing. But we decided, well, we just didn't do that for some reason. We still, who knows?
I have broom corn seeds.
Yeah, we got some seeds, so the empire of brooms is going to begin. So if you need one, let us know in a couple of years. But we decided that we wanted to raise livestock here, and we picked sheep because doing our research, sheep seems to be in demand. The meat was in demand. They also are a lot lower maintenance than some animals in different aspects. They are easy on infrastructure, and when we bought this farm, the infrastructure was very, very, very dilapidated, is probably the best word to use. The dairy was retired in the mid-90s, and my grandfather kept a few horses here, a few like 25, 30 horses at a time. He had them on the farm, and he just let them have free reign of everything. And if anyone here has ever had horses that have just been allowed to roam freely through a property and into buildings, you know that they are quite destructive. They will chew on things, they will knock things over, and so we have been replacing beams and posts in the barn, fences, all kinds of stuff. And so we started that journey a number of years ago now. We got our first animals in 2020, and then we started putting in new infrastructure. We've been very lucky in that we started a farm as opposed to kind of taking over a pre-existing farm. Like, there were no animals, there was no process on this farm when we bought it. So we have been able to kind of implement things in our own way as we go. And that's allowed us to do a lot of kind of, I don't want to say more creative, but a few different things than people would have done previously. One of the examples that I'm really excited to show you guys is something that PWCP has helped us with funding, and that's our intensive rotational grazing system in the back. We took the original pasture land that was there for the dairy cows, and we created a system that so far seems to be working really well with the animals that we have, and it's designed to support a larger flock than we currently have. And we're on our way to do it. So it's pretty cool. I'm excited to show you guys that. I also want to just kind of mention that we also have been working with PWCP for a cover crop system. Well, not system, field. Fields is kind of a system, I guess. However, this year it was a very, very, very miserable spring in this part of the province. And our piece of land was one of the many pieces of land that was so wet that it was impossible to get anything in the ground this year. So that nice pile of green seed over there in those bags is going in next spring, and it should be wonderful because our the field that is part of this that we'll have a better view of as we get a little further into the back area there. That area has been cultivated land. It's been used for commercial crops for a very long time, tilling and spraying and all of that kind of stuff. And we wanted to move away from that. And PWCP is allowing us to use that funding to put in something that will be now, and I always mix these two, but a perennial hay crop. Perennial is one you don't plant all the time, right? Annual you plant, okay. For some reason that one always gets me. And I want to say annual, but anyways. It's going to be a perennial mixed hay crop with a cover crop over top as it goes in, and then that will be relatively untouched, and hopefully that does wonders for our animals as well as for the ecosystem and landscape around here. We are in,
What will you use as a cover crop?
so we have a mixed blend. So it's got a few different grasses in it, some legumes. The cover crop is going to be oats. I have a friend who's got oats, and we'll cut it as green feed.
Yeah.
So well, you guys, some of you may have visited him at Yablonsky's farm. They have oat seeds there. Maybe some of you were here yesterday. But anyways, it's one of the projects that EIWD's been working on for years too. So he's a great guy. He's got lots of oats, and he's going to help me out with that when we are able to get to it. So that's the plan. If anybody feels like coming out and seeding the field, let me know, because I currently don't really have the equipment to do it. But, any help is necessary. You could if we all walk in a line, right, and scatter, it should work well. But, we were able to work it and get it ready for next spring though this year, so you will see that it is black earth right now. The plan is for it to not ever look like that again and to be beautiful, almost pseudo prairie-like grassland that we can utilize as a hay crop every year. So that's some of the plans. There's many plans going on right now too, but if you guys want to follow me, I'll take you on the and they don't really suffer too badly because of that. So the ones that don't breed are there. The breeding animals will be in the barn. I do give them a little bit of extra cover just because they are growing lambs and a little bit of extra energy helps. These are Icelandic chickens. That's a thing. If you didn't know, I didn't until I got some, but those are Icelandic chickens. They are an old world breed of chicken. They, like the Icelandic sheep, they've got this diverse plumage to them. They are quite young. We haven't got any eggs out of them yet, but I acquired them this summer from a friend, and we're hoping to get some eggs soon. And if you guys have any old pumpkins after Halloween, bring them by. The chickens go crazy for those, so feel free. The sheep too, actually. Our shearing this year, sort of early October. We do it twice a year, once in the spring after the lambs are born, and then we do another one in the fall. And each time we shear them, we get between 4 and 8 inches of fleece off of each one of them. The reason that we do it twice a year is because generally in the spring, the animals have been, they've been growing lambs inside of them. They have been eating dry feed inside the barn. So they end up with a lot of stuff in their fleece, which can be very labor intensive to remove. It's also a lower quality fleece because they are working harder to grow those lambs. So that wool is what you would call waste wool. We do still go through it and we keep the really nice stuff and we get that processed into knitting yarn and batting and usable products that way. But the other stuff we use as mulch. In Manitoba, there's over 500,000 pounds of wool is discarded every year because there's either it's either a low quality or it is just not feasible for a lot of people to process it and to pay the money to get something done with it. And there also is not a huge demand in Manitoba to just buy raw fleeces from people to send it to more intense manufacturing things. So something that if any of you guys are entrepreneurs of any type, there are all kinds of opportunities for using waste wool in many different ways. And these are things that we always are thinking about when we do this. Because if you think about that, it's between 500,000 and 600,000 pounds of wool is just either thrown out on a field to rot or burnt in a back pasture. That could be turned into felted products. It could be turned into things like well, and I'll show you when we check out the shelter belt that we have here. Hold those thoughts, continue on. Left in that paddock, currently it's about 7 days that I have them in each one, and then I take them out and move them to the next one. By the time they have been spent 7 days in the paddock, it kind of looks like this. It's eaten down very, very, very short, very low, and they do it in a very uniform way. And one of the benefits of this, or one of many benefits for this, is that first off, when animals are given, let's just say we didn't have any cross fencing, this was just one big pasture, the sheep would go out there and what would they go for first? They would go find their very favorite things and they would eat it all immediately, as quickly as they possibly could. They'd go find their favorite stuff and they'd eat it all. And then it would, you know, they would ignore the things that they don't like. They would ignore the weeds, they would ignore the thistles and all that kind of stuff. And those ones would start to grow, they would start to proliferate, and you end up with different management issues for the plants that you don't want in your pasture. Like in some cases, we have a few invasive species that get around. They tend to do that. Whenever you have machinery moving around, there's always an inevitability. Here in this part of Manitoba, we see a lot of red bartzia. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. It's like beautiful little pink flowers, but it's kind of low quality forage for these animals. However, they like it a lot. So we've had a few things that have come up in the past when we've had machinery go through to do haying and all that sort of stuff. They've left some seeds behind and these areas have grown up, but the sheep have actually targeted that and eaten it really quickly when they found it as well. So when they're in these small areas, they go through and they'll eat tons of different stuff. They'll keep the whole thing nice and low, and they won't allow one particular plant to take over. So it adds to that really nice biodiverse system that we want. That's our our philosophy is we want to have a really diverse pasture that allows these animals to get a really diverse diet. It allows them to kind of maintain those really small balances of minerals and micronutrients that they really need to thrive. And we have found that it produces a really rich and very flavorful meat off of the animals as well. So we find that rich, diverse diet of getting all the different plants that are out there, it gives it a very complex flavor. I don't have any to share with you. I apologize. I did not roast a lamb for you guys, but it is, I would say, and I'm not biased, but I'd say it's probably the best lamb in the world. I kid. It's very good though. It's nice. Now there is a bit of a trade-off that we have though, because our animals are 100% pasture and grass fed, raised, finished. That's it. We don't put grain in these animals. We don't do anything else for them. They are all grass. That is how they live in Iceland, this type of animal. They are raised, they're all sent away in the spring. They go off into the Icelandic scrublands, and that's how they live. And then they bring them all back in the wintertime, sort them, and butcher them, that sort of thing. So they're not very good with grain. They thrive on an all grass diet. Now, because of that, we get a smaller carcass weight on these animals. They don't grow big and chonky, and they're not big juicy ones the same way that you would get from a commercial like an Arcot or a Rideau that do really well on grain. These guys don't. They don't thrive on that. But so there's a trade-off there. Our animals are smaller, so we end up charging a little bit more of a premium per pound on them, but it so far balances out, and it's quite delicious. We have a wait list for our sheep. We only sell direct market, and we have a long wait list for it because the demand, people who buy it again and again and again. So that says something. I mean, hopefully you guys will join that list at some point. We'll have many. There are many things going into Lake Winnipeg. We are really small potatoes compared to a lot of other things going on here, but it's one of those things where every little bit counts, especially when it comes to the environment and the earth. If everybody does little things, it does add up in big ways pretty quickly. So something that we have been also working on is we have a few wetland development projects on the farm as well. It's kind of difficult to see, but this weedy hill over there is a berm that we've created, and down just past that kind of funky looking fence line, there's a big wetland area that's in its first phase. We're making a big S-shaped wetland that will kind of go around all of our infrastructure where we keep our animals, so that any of the wastewater or flow that comes off of our property at least has a small buffer before it enters any municipal waterways, and that acts to kind of take things out of the water that can end up adding to the problems that Lake Winnipeg is currently going through, nitrogen and all those sorts of things. So we really are focusing on that. Have this nice little wetland. It goes around these buildings, and then there's a long ditch that goes along the outside of our little bush there, and then it connects to the regular ditch system that's out there. So it grabs all of the water from all of our pastures and all the high ground here, and that hopefully is doing its job to mitigate things. We've had cattails and blue herons and a sheep habitat. We want to maintain it as a habitat for all kinds of living things, because the more diverse that an area is, a system is, the more resilient it is to changes and all kinds of things like that. And I'm sure we can all agree that you can't predict the weather. The last number of years have taught us that. So having a diverse habitat and a diverse ecosystem around the farm is gonna just make it a little bit more robust and able to survive wet years, dry years, cold years, hot years. It'll be a little bit more able to do that. It'll also look really nice. And hey, let's be real here. We are a sheep farm, but because we are so close to the town of Gimli, we also are doing a little bit of ecotourism type things as well. During the Icelandic festival, it's a mega popular festival here in Gimli, all things Icelandic. We raise Icelandic sheep, so we open up the farm, we let people come down here, meet the animals, have a good time, that sort of thing. So having it look really nice and have not just look like a big wide open field or something like that, it's going to have benefits environmentally as well as to us as like mentally. But it'll be a beautified area. There is also pardon me, along our road going out to the back, there's a second shelter belt that will be along that as well. So it's another eco buffer shelter belt, mixed species shelter belt that will do this. But man, oh man, this was a crazy one. It was so much work. It was so wet. I brought snacks to the EIWD folks, and they worked very hard. But I brought the snack. I was busy, we'll say. But no, they worked tirelessly for days, and they got it all planted. They were not able to use any of their machinery to do it because, again, it was so wet this spring. You could not get a machine in there to move things around. So thousands of trees hand planted by the folks mingling in around you. The hard work that the staff at EIWD does is just astounding. It really is. So if you have them working on any projects for you guys, you're in very good hands. I mean, yeah, I say that from experience. They work very hard and they work tirelessly. And it's really interesting because a lot of the folks that you meet doing things like this, they have these bigger picture views. It's not just, oh, how can we get this farmer to be a more successful farmer? They have these ideas of how can we make this farm better for its landscape, its community, the larger community. And I found it really inspiring to work with a lot of these folks because they want to help us out on our farm because we want to help the lake and the town and you know, all those sorts of things. And so it's really collaborative and it's very cooperative and really nice for that. So it's something to be very proud of, the folks that are doing this sort of thing. You guys are doing really great work. But that's the shelter belt. It'll look a lot cool. Come back in a few years. It'll be a lot more interesting to look at. They're quite small right now, but...
Well, it's hard to see at this time of year now that they've lost most of their leaves. This is a taller tree row, so you can see most of them. They did not grow as high as we wanted because the deer did browse them, but they survived the year. So hopefully if we get a crop in the field, next year they'll be more interested in our perennial cover than they will be in our trees. Because right now this was with that field being fallow, this was like a little buffet station for them.
Can you tell us again what they are? Because I didn't hit record properly and I missed your speech on what they were.
What an eco buffer is?
No, what this particular example of it is.
Well, so here this is the second row. So it has some of the taller trees. So we have in this one we have Saskatoons and aspens, maples, birch, and willows. Yeah.
Out of long rolls of
Most of them, because they're native, even if only half of them catch, the other ones will spread out or seed out, or the birds will carry the berries elsewhere, so you should be fine.
Yes, yeah. It will likely, I did an assessment and we had, when we first planted, the deer actually came and pulled some of the trees out.
Yeah, right.
And so I replanted those and they did survive. They just went for the Saskatoon. So everywhere we had a Saskatoon, they pulled it out.
Yeah.
I planted them and they did still survive. And when I did an assessment here when things were green, we had pretty much I'd say like a 90% success rate, which is really high. It just wasn't the growth I wanted. I went to a different project site where they didn't have as many, like a deer issue like we did, and their trees ended up growing this much. Whereas ours, if you look at every single one, you'll see that it has been nipped, but they're still alive, and they'll probably just end up putting more energy into their roots anyways if they get impacted, and it'll work out next year.
So maybe you could have put some.
You can also sell. They are incredibly luxurious. They're a wonderful gift for, if somebody has a new baby, you put it in the crib. They're really, really, really nice. People did that 50 years ago. That was a super common gift, is to give somebody a little sheepskin for when they had a kid. So you can see that the colors, again, super diverse in this flock. That one is going to make a really nice sheepskin. I hate saying it and looking at them, but looking forward to that. But you can see they still have 2 more months before we do take them out to be processed, and so they do have a bit more time left to grow. These are all rams. We haven't sent any of our ewes to be butchered yet because we are still growing our flock. We have a new ram coming this year. They were born in May of this year, yeah. They're mostly wool. Yeah, they're very thick and fluffy. That one's been short, and you can see there's a lot less, and she's a couple of years old. But no, the average weight that we get off of the carcass for these animals when we do sell them at about 8 months is about 30 pounds.
Wow.
There are some that are less, there are some that are more, but that's the hanging weight. So that's to be processed and sold to the customer at that weight. So once and guts are removed and all the extra pieces. That's how much we get from each of them. So they're not very big carcasses.
So don't buy a quarter.
Yeah, don't buy a quarter. We only sell half in the wall, and we're debating not even selling half anymore. But they are. It's a really neat product too. The sheepskins. I can't stress it enough. They are very luxurious, and I will say, it is also a labor of love because for every sheepskin that you see out there, it's about between 6 and 10 hours of work to brush it out and to get it cleaned and ready to be put on somebody's couch. So it's a lot. Imagine taking the tangles out of your kid's hair, but imagine that their whole body is covered in it and their hair is 10 times more dense. Yeah, it's just a lot of work to do it, but it's worth it.
While we're here by the trees,
So maybe it would be upstairs.
They are impervious to it. I have found that they can handle any temperature. They have access to water. They've been out here sitting in the sun in 35 degrees. Yeah, it's honestly, they are super robust creatures. And one of the reasons that Icelandic sheep were something that we wanted to do is we wanted a lower. You can probably see that the grass is shorter and it's getting taller as we go this way. They have been on these paddocks a number of times already. It ends up being a lot of hay because each one of these sheep during the winter months, they'll eat 4 pounds of hay a day. Oh, really? So yeah, so if we have 100 breeding animals, it's 400 pounds every single day throughout the winter for that small flock. And that means that one of the big round bales is going to last you 3 or 4 days. So you need a lot of those bales to get through the whole winter.
Yeah. Craig, if like besides from the water district, what would you say are the main community organizations, or even informal organizations that you use for sharing information about what you're working on or find out new ideas?
Oh, well, honestly, we meet other people that are farming. We've made a number of good friends that are trying new projects and new things all the time. So other people in the same situation have been a big resource. We get the word out a little bit about what we're doing through the town of Gimli. We've partnered with the Icelandic Festival to kind of put ourselves on the map and get people out here that are keen on seeing the place and learning about it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm
But there's no provincial or national type of organizations for similar farms, or? Well,
there's like the Manitoba Sheep Association, and there are groups like that. We're not as established as a lot of other farms, and so we are still making a lot of those connections and finding a lot of those resources. Mm-hmm. But I guess from that perspective, there's the Canadian Wool Growers Cooperative, which is groups of people that are sheep farmers and wool farmers. There is also it's called the Pembina Fiber Shed, which again is groups of fiber producers. So they do things like the Manitoba Fiber Festival, where producers and farmers and makers of things with fiber get together as well. So we do make a lot of connections, but as far as like a provincial organization, we generally interact with the province through things like the watershed district and all of those, because they kind of are the liaison between funding and that sort of stuff for any of these projects.
So it's kind of by product mostly.
Generally, that's been our experience, is that we've met a lot of wool people, and then we've met a lot of meat sheep people, but it's less.
Do you listen to podcasts?
You know, when I have the time, but it's...
Because you don't do a lot of driving, so you're probably not... Like if everything's here.
Yeah, everything's here, so I'm not on the road all that much. Although sometimes I go for a little drive. Okay. I should have something on.
Are you familiar with John Kemp's podcast?
I've heard the name, yes, absolutely, but I'm not a big listener of that.
Yeah, he's got a lot, and he's the biggest one on the... And then there's Cohen Van Siegen is investing in regenerative agriculture. He's got over 300, and he's also super popular.
Oh, I'll have to look into those, because I mean, all of those resources, you can take something from almost anything. A lot of hay, because each one of these sheep during the winter months, they'll eat 4 pounds
of hay a day. Oh, really? So, yeah, so if we have 100 breeding animals, it's 400 pounds every single day throughout the winter for that small flock. And that means that one of the big round bales is going to last you 3 or 4 days. So you need a lot of those bales to get through the whole winter.
So Craig, if like aside from the water district, what would you say are the main community organizations, or even informal organizations that you use for sharing information about what you're working on or find out new ideas?
Oh, well, honestly, we meet other people that are farming. We've made a number of good friends that are trying new projects and new things all the time. So other people in the same situation have been a big resource. We get the word out a little bit about what we're doing through the town of Gimli. We've partnered with the Icelandic Festival to kind of put ourselves on the map and get people out here that are keen on seeing the place and learning about it. So yeah, I'm
But there's no provincial or national type of organizations for similar farms, or
well, there's like the Manitoba Sheep Association, and there are groups like that. We're not as established as a lot of other farms, and so we are still making a lot of those connections and finding a lot of those resources. But I guess from that perspective, there's the Canadian Wool Growers Cooperative, which is groups of people that are sheep farmers and wool farmers. There is also it's called the Pembina Fiber Shed, which again is groups of fiber producers. So they do things like the Manitoba Fiber Festival, where producers and farmers and makers of things with fiber get together as well. So we do make a lot of connections, but as far as like a provincial organization, we generally interact with the province through things like the watershed district and all of those, because they kind of are the liaison between funding and that sort of stuff for any of these projects.
so it's kind of by product mostly.
Generally, that's been our experience, is that we've met a lot of wool people, and then we've met a lot of meat sheep people, but it's less.
Do you listen to podcasts?
You know, when I have the time, but it's
Because you don't do a lot of driving, so you're probably not, like, if everything's here.
yeah, everything's here, so I'm not on the road all that much. Although sometimes I go for a little drive.
Okay.
I should have something on.
Are you familiar with John Kemp's podcast?
I've heard the name, yes, absolutely, but I'm not a big listener of that.
Yeah, he's got a lot, and he's the biggest one on the. And then there's Co-Invent Season is investing in regenerative agriculture. He's got over 300, and he's also super popular.
Oh, I'll have to look into those, because I mean, all of those resources, you can take something from almost anything. You know,
Yeah.
when people are doing interesting things, when they're doing innovative things, even if, let's say, it doesn't necessarily apply to your situation exactly, there are all those little pieces that you can take, which is why I'm also pretty keen on doing a tour like this with all these folks, is because I see that as the opportunity to maybe just be like, hey, these are the things we're doing, and maybe you can apply it somehow to what you're doing and have success the way that we've had.
I was just listening to a podcast on the way over, and the guy who was being interviewed, who's more of a financial expert, but involved in it, and he was saying many of the ideas he's implementing are actually from Australia.
Lots of interesting farms in Australia, no doubt.
That's the kind of thing that the social media can bring you ideas to investigate further that you wouldn't find in a local group or even in a trade association for one particular product, right?
Well, I mean, like you're getting at there, it makes a lot of sense. You know, you can only think of so many things yourself in a day. You can only try so many ways of solving a problem. But if you get people doing that, and